Welcome to the 3DownNation podcast. I'm Justin Dunk, joined by John Hodge and JC Abbott. Today we're discussing the Edmonton Elks getting shut out for the first time in 47 years, boys.
The retirement of four-time All-Star offensive lineman Derek Dennis.
Janarion Grant's sensational punt return touchdown for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
Touchdown Atlantic selling out for the second consecutive year.
And our picks against the spread for Week 3 of the CFL regular season. But first,
Tiger Cats QB Bo Levi Mitchell left Sunday's Week 2 loss to the Toronto Argonauts with what has been officially listed as an adductor injury. Head coach Orlando Steinhauer has already ruled him out for Hamilton's home opener, though he is expected to dress in a backup role behind Matthew Schiltz. What do you make of the injury to Mitchell and what this means for the Ticats?
It seems like this injury could be week to week, but based on people I've talked to in and around the league, and the Tiger Cats, a lot of those kind of people are staying tight-lipped on this right now, but it seems like it's going to be week to week. And you look at the way that he was walking off BMO Field, had the ice pack on it, and how he was very gingerly moving around Tim Hortons Field during practice on Tuesday. And that makes me think that this is an injury that's going to be keeping him off the field for longer than at least a week. That said, I think he's going to want to get back on the field very quickly. And one of the reasons why I think that that's a possibility, at least right now, is because the Tiger Cats, according to Orlando Steinhauer, and this could change, are planning to dress him for Hamilton's home opener. Now, talking to some personnel people around the league and executives and people who have dealt with the salary cap, they're wondering if there's any chance that Bo Levi Mitchell would be out for 6 weeks. Why would you not put him on the 6-game injured list right now and save that cap money? So Bo Levi Mitchell's contract for the 2023 season is $502,000 in hard money. There's $18,000 in there in what we call playtime. So he could get up to $520,000. That's every time he starts a game, plays 51% or more of the snaps, he gets $1,000 more than the 502. But of that contract, the $502, $300,000 was a signing bonus. $175,000 was base salary, which is paid out on a per game basis. So you look at this, and if he's out for 6 games, and I'm no mathematician here, but it could save you, in and around $50,000 on the salary cap. And you can always pull him off early, but you could potentially have that savings. It's around $9,700 in change per game that you would save if Mitchell's not going to play and going to be out for 6 games. Obviously, the Tiger Cats don't want him to be out for that long. But the only reason that I can think of that they're going to dress him this week is because they have a bye week coming up. Perhaps they'll see how Mitchell feels in this lower body injury and if he can get back after the bye week. And they don't want to make a snap decision on bringing in a quarterback on a short week.
and just for the listeners who maybe don't know, the CFL has 2 injury designations, the 1-game injured list and the 6-game injured list. Players have to actually be injured to be put on the 6-game injured list, and those players do not have their game checks count against the salary cap. Players on the 1-game injured list do not have to be injured, and the reason for that is their salaries do still count against the salary cap. So it's not a cap advantage to lie and say, oh yeah, this guy pulled a hamstring, he's going to sit this week. And a lot of teams actually use that 1-game injured list essentially as extra roster spots, because if you're not paying them or if you don't want to cut a guy, right, you want to keep him around, you may as well do it. In fact, the BC Lions, will use an example right now. They had 5 players on their 1-game injured list this past week who were all healthy. The only guy who was actually hurt was Lucky Whitehead. And not saying BC does this, but sometimes you'll see teams around the league point at their injured list and say, well, look at how banged up we are. And fans kind of go like, oh yeah, that makes sense. You guys are losing because you have so many injuries. And then it's like, well, hold on. You got 12 guys on the injured list and only 7 are actually hurt. Like so I track that stuff in my own roster tracking, but that was the strange thing to me, Dunk, is when Mitchell was ruled out, it was like, okay, you put him on the 6th game, and that way if he's gone for 6, you save that whack of cash. And by him not doing that, you'd think at least that the Ticats feel as though he's going to be back within that 6-week span. But to me, my main takeaway from this, because that was the question, I make that obviously the CFL's script writers this year were affected by the writers' strike down south, because nobody would have ever written this to be the way that this went, right? Steel Town, super hungry fans. You got the long Grey Cup drought. They go and sign, the veteran gunslinger, 2 MOPs, 2 Grey Cups. He's not even going to be available for the home opener. Like, how much does that suck? I'm not saying it's anybody's fault. I'm not blaming anybody. But what could have been an amazing storyline, especially if the Ticats got off to a hot 2-0 start. Instead, arguably Matthew Schultz is the better quarterback right now, which I don't think anybody would have said going into the season. But Bo Levi Mitchell did not look good. He's got 1 touchdown, 4 picks. And those picks, boys, are generally from terrible decisions. He did 2 that he threw this past week. He threw a duck in the end zone to Duke Williams. And then he went on a lofted ball to the backcourt of the end zone. He threw straight to double coverage. It was the easiest interception of Deshaun Amos's career. So far, it's disappointing from Mitchell. Maybe Matthew Schultz will be able to do more with that offense. And if he does, and he wins that home opener, I'm interested to see what type of reception Mitchell's going to get when he presumably comes back into the game.
It's an interesting question because Schultz impressed me a lot last year when he was coming in for Dane Evans, almost unseated Evans in the time he was in. Unfortunately, had a bit of an injury at the time when he was just about to take over that starter's job, ended up handing it back to Evans and then having to sub in a couple more times. But this is a guy who is no spring chicken by any means. He's almost 30, but he moves around really well. He has that athletic ability to get outside the pocket, to take off with his legs. He's fast. He's got a big arm. He makes good decisions, and he's played good football for the Hamilton Tiger Cats in the past. Right now, Bo Levi Mitchell is absolutely none of those things, and you don't want to see a guy like that get hurt. But if you're watching that game, even before he went down, you are wondering, well, is it time to put Schultz in? Because clearly this team doesn't have a spark right now with Mitchell at the helm, and he's still got to build some chemistry with that receiving core, and that might take some time, but Schultz has that already built in. So this might give the Ticats actually a little bit of a spark this week to have somebody with experience with that roster take over and potentially benefit Mitchell in the long run to sit back for a little bit, watch, learn how those receivers move around, and maybe once he's healthy, come back with a little bit more understanding of his own offense and what he needs to do for everyone around him to be successful.
No, I think it's simple, man. Just stop turning the football over. He knows the offense. It's very clear to me. He's somewhat comfortable in it. He's just made some terrible decisions. And Hodge, to your point about the script writers, the Tiger Cats fans don't want to see this script play out again because they've seen this before in the past. Casey Printers, Jason Moss, Henry Burris, all quarterbacks who were, let's say, politely, on the back nine of their careers that the Tiger Cats gave big money to, did not pan out the way that Bob Young and Scott Mitchell had Grey Cup vision. So I'm not saying that's the fate of Bo Levi Mitchell because that's still to be written. But the Tiger Cats know this script all too well. They're fans, I should say.
Well, and you could even add Zach Collaros to that list with the ACL tear. You could add Dane Evans to that list, who signed a big money deal going into the 2022 season. Yeah, we're not even in bad sequel territory. We're in like Fast and the Furious territory where we're on like number 10. It's crazy.
No one has ever called Bo Levi Mitchell fast in his career. Furious a couple times, never fast.
Furious. Never fast. Anyway, we digress. The Edmonton Elks were shut out for the first time in 47 years, losing 22-0 to the BC Lions on Saturday night in Week 2. JC, you had a prime seat to the snooze fest, which followed an outstanding performance from LL Cool J. Taylor Cornelius threw for 98 yards in the loss as the Elks managed a measly 139 yards of net offense. Boy, some nights that's a quarter, not a game. Chris Jones has said his team will stick with Cornelius for Week 3. Do you think that's the right decision?
Do not. There is nothing I've seen from Taylor Cornelius in that game, or in fact the first 2 weeks of the season, that gives me any faith that he's going to turn his performance around anytime soon. And you mentioned that LL Cool J concert before the game. He was as advertised, energetic, moving around the field, just absolutely dripping, more sweat than I've ever seen a single human being produce. And when he walked off the stage, he was more drenched in sweat and more fired up than Taylor Cornelius was after his performance. He looked dejected. He looked like he didn't have any answers. And a couple years ago when Trevor Harris was there and Cornelius first came in and Harris was shipped out of town, I noted that for all his other flaws, at least Cornelius had some fire in that moment. He was passionate. He was out there in the media saying the right things, bringing some passion to that franchise. I didn't see that after this game at all. And that's extremely concerning to me, given the fact that you could not design a worse performance for a team than what the Edmonton Elks had. I mean, less than 100 yards passing, guys, on basically what was 58% completion percentage. That is unacceptable. They were not a threat the entire game, and Edmonton, frankly, needs to make a change that will give them some spark. But unfortunately, they made the decision to give Cornelius a whackload of money way too early, and they don't want to move on from him because they'll be on the hook next season if they do.
I think you got to make that decision because Chris Jones has to understand he's coaching for his job. And yes, the pressure has ratcheted up here, but he's on a series of one-year contracts essentially under his agreement with the Edmonton Elks. And who cares if you have to move on from the guy that you gave CFL starter level money to, as long as you start winning football games. That's all Victor Cui and the Elks board is going to care about, is if they see progress on this team. And it's too bad because I think there has been some marked progress on defense. The special teams, could be better. I think they could be a little bit more disciplined overall. But the issue with this team right now is Taylor Cornelius. I hate to say it, and we're going to continue probably to rail on this guy. I think all three of us agree, but there's a lack of energy in this guy. Like, he is as boring and as dead as a doorknob. Like, this dude just seems like he doesn't infuse any energy and have any natural leadership abilities with this team. You got guys like Geno Lewis, Stephen Dunbar Jr., Dylan Mitchell, Kevin Brown, who looks like a great young up-and-coming running back, a solid offensive line, and you throw for less than 100 yards and you get shut out? Like, that's inexcusable. To me, either Kyle Loxley or Trey Ford should have been put in that game in BC to shake something loose with Cornelius so he can understand that his job is on the line right now. And Chris Jones needs to understand the same thing. I think he does, but we're not seeing it if he doesn't make a change at the quarterback position when, and that is not if, it's a when, Cornelius continues to struggle, because he's going up against, for my money, the best defensive game planner in the CFL right now in Corey Mace for the Toronto Argonauts, who has a deep unit with Flo Ormalade in there coming full speed downhill. Sean Oakman and the rest of that defense played some quality football in their home opener in that win over Hamilton and frustrating Bo Levi Mitchell. I think they can do the same thing against the Corn Dog and eat up all they want of that dude. So I think there needs to be a plan in place for Trey Ford or Kyle Loxley to play when Cornelius struggles, because it's going to happen.
To me, the only way that the Elks can fix this Taylor Cornelius thing is to get him doing what he's actually good at. This is a guy who I think we have forgotten was Edmonton's leading rusher last season. He had 500 yards on the ground, 7 TDs. This is, he's 6'5", right? 225. Like, he's built, he's big, he's thick, but he can run like a gazelle. And so far this season, he has, in 2 games, a grand total of 2 carries. They're asking him to be Peyton Manning back there, when at best, he's like a poor man's Cam Newton. I'm not talking MVP, whatever it was, 2015 Cam Newton. I'm talking about like New England Patriots Cam Newton, who can win you games. It's not going to be, super pretty, but he can get the basics done. So I like you guys, I do want to point a finger at Taylor Cornelius because I think he deserves that. He's not been very good. But obviously the game planning around him has been a massive problem because we know it's not the weapons, right? The receivers are as good as any team in the league. The running back is as good as any team in the league. The offensive line has not been great. I think Andrew Garnett has really struggled at left tackle, but the offensive line has not been bad. It's been, I would call it mediocre overall. And with a competent game plan and proper scheming from offensive coordinator Stephen McAdoo, I think this offense could work. Because let's look at the numbers, guys. I've got the passing numbers up here in front of me. I'll call them the CFL's well-guarded statistics that, seemingly are unavailable almost everywhere.
Are we sure these are right?
I would give these a 99% chance of being right. So take that with a grain of salt. Though
more positivity than I have.
Well, this is from statscrew.com, which scraped last year's statistics and still has them on their website. So these numbers from 2022, I'm confident are correct. He threw for 68 yards with 11 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. So far this year, he is worse by literally every metric. His quarterback rating this year, boys, is worse than it was when he was a rookie in 2021, playing on a terrible team that literally led the board of governors to fire, or board of directors there, to fire everybody, right? Head coach, GM, president, everybody. So it's crazy to me that Taylor Cornelius is playing worse now than he was as a raw rookie with far worse weapons in Edmonton on an offense in 2021 that made Trevor Harris look bad. So yes, Cornelius deserves the blame, but the point I'm trying to make is there's a lot more at work here that I think is holding him back. And unfortunately, one would think that all of those things are going to hold back Kyle Loxley or Trey Ford or even Jarrett Daggy, who's on the practice roster right now and I thought looked really good in limited action in the preseason. So I do not have high hopes for this Edmonton team right now, but hopefully they prove me wrong, because Lord knows those fans in Edmonton deserve a home win.
You heard it here first. Jarrett Daggy is the answer at quarterback for the Edmonton Elks, right, Hodge? No? Okay.
Hey,
we're moving on.
Teach me how to Daggy. Let's get it going.
There are 2 points you made there I want to briefly touch on. The first, I think you're absolutely right with Stephen McAdoo having some of the responsibility here. I was not impressed with the game plans in either week. In week 1, Chris Jones actually came out and was vocally critical of the fact that they took too many shots downfield. There were too many vertical routes in that offense. They forced Cornelius to hold on to the ball far too long. And his response seemed to be to take no shots, to throw no vertical routes, to have nothing down the field at all against BC. That offense was entirely anemic. Now, as much as we can be critical of McAdoo, I think we all know the realities here, and that's Chris Jones is not going to place this on the shoulders of Stephen McAdoo and do anything, because those two are knit very tightly together and they're a package deal. So in reality, no matter how much we can be critical of McAdoo, the responsibility is going to have to fall on Taylor Cornelius or whoever's under center for the Edmonton Elks, because McAdoo is not getting fired. The other thing that you mentioned there, Hodge, is Cam Newton. And I'm glad you bring up that comparison, because I've used it before in that the strategy for the Elks this season was to go the Cam Newton route. And I've talked to old Panthers scouts back from his MVP heyday, and what their instructions were at that time was Cam Newton has a great arm, he's super athletic, he can win us a championship, but he's not accurate enough, so we have to get a certain type of receiver to benefit him. We need tall guys who can go up and get the high ball, which is exactly what the Edmonton Elks did this offseason, bringing in contested catch guys who can make incredible plays like Eugene Lewis and Stephen Dunbar Jr. and compensate for the quarterback. Well, it's gotten so bad with Taylor Cornelius under center that they're not compensating anymore. You look at the numbers and it's absolutely shocking. Besides that one 100-yard catch by Eugene Lewis for a touchdown, which, by the way, was thrown in behind him and was all on the receiver, basically none of them have any production. Eugene Lewis, 1 catch on 3 targets last week for 9 yards. Dylan Mitchell, who was out here saying, I'm getting 2,000 yards this season, guys. I'm going to have one of the greatest seasons of all time in the CFL. He's got 2 catches for -4 yards through 2 weeks of the season. Stephen Dunbar did nothing in week 1, had 40 yards. He was a veritable star this week, right? These guys need to get opportunities to be more productive, because we know all of them are stars in their own right. They're all guys who can make plays for you. But right now, the quarterbacking situation is so bad, those balls are not even being placed in the same realm. They are not in position to do what they do best.
Man, I had no idea that Dylan Mitchell had fewer receiving yards than me at this point. Get me an agent, boys. Get me an agent.
I would pay to see that, Hodge.
I might need an agent. I'm getting warmed up over here. I think I can do better than the corn dog. I'm ready. Janarion Grant's 92-yard punt return touchdown against the Roughriders was 3DownNation's play of the week, maybe play of the year, man. That thing was epic. Hodge, you talked to the legendary CFL return man, Henry Gizmo Williams, a outstanding idea about whether or not it was the greatest return of all time. What can you tell us about it?
Well, I've been very impressed by the amount of feedback this article I wrote, and obviously you can check it out on 3downnation.com, received. I seem to have struck a nice balance because I think I've received an equal number of tweets saying that I'm an idiot for even suggesting that this is the best return of all time, and also that I'm an idiot for even suggesting it's not. So I think that's the right balance from some people who are Bomber fans, some people who are Bomber haters, and some who I think are pretty much Winnipeg neutral. I'll say this, though. Henry Williams did not think that this was the number one punt return of all time. And that was, by the way, the reason I reached out to him. My first thought when this suggestion was out there that this could be the best of all time, it was like, well, hold on. What is the best of all time? I don't know. And so a lot of people seem to say, at least talking to, and by the way, shout out to Andrew Hoskins, our Edmonton contributor who helped set up this interview with the Giz. He said it's the 1987 Grey Cup. Henry Williams returned up the sideline from that game. I wasn't sure. Gizmo himself said that his best return, he didn't say the best return, but he said his best return was a punt return he had in 1993 against the Calgary Stampeders. We have video of it in the article if you want to watch it. We also have video of the Janarion Grant return if you want to watch that back-to-back. And the Giz essentially said his was better because the Saskatchewan Roughriders were simply terrible when it came to the tackling. Like the defensive group was really poor. And on the one hand, I think that's valid. On the other hand, is it breaking tackles part of a great return? So to me, I think that this is a grand debate. I think it's one that a lot of people are having fun with at the moment. And if there's one thing I really want to come of this, I want to see a top 10 video somewhere. And we don't have the access to the archives, boys, so we can't do it at 3DownNation. But somebody with access to the deep archives of CFL punt returns, I want to see a top 10 compilation so that this debate can be had in full, because this is a league that has celebrated special teams and the return. It's something that is dying in the States, right? The NFL doesn't really have great returns anymore. In the CFL, we seem to get very good returns every week and great returns every month. And this one was, I think, truly exceptional. So I want to see a top 10 candidates list, maybe in the off season, and that would be a great opportunity to talk about this more.
I can't believe I'm going to do this because it's not in the shot right now, but right behind me and to my left, right above my fireplace, is a framed and autographed photograph of Gizmo Williams. But I'm disagreeing with the Giz here. He's the greatest of all time. But I think Janarion Grant's return was better than any he came up with during his career, including the one he mentioned in that video. I think it is a legitimate contender for the greatest of all time. Now, there are returns that have happened in bigger moments, right? This is a week 2 matchup. In terms of its importance, it's certainly nowhere near the top of the list compared to punt return touchdowns that happened in Grey Cups, even like Janarion's last year. But in terms of the difficulty level, the amount of broken tackles, the way he wove across the field, I came away stunningly impressed by this. And everyone was out there on social media saying it was one of the, if not the greatest return of all time. And so I did the thing I do when I want to check to make sure I'm not in my little social media bubble. I go and talk to my 65-year-old dad who is not on social media and has no clue what's on there. And I said, "Did you see the game last night?" He said, "Yeah, I saw what I think was the greatest return I've ever seen in my life." And so that is my check. He watched all of Gizmo's career, and I think he's right. Now, my one caveat before I give Dunk his chance to talk, we need someone to dig through the archives, because I think anyone who returned punts before the year 1975 deserves a special shout out. And that's because before that point, there was no blocking allowed on punt returns in the CFL. If you're able to house one with no blocking around you, I think you deserve a little bit of credit in this conversation. But I haven't seen those videos, so I'm going to go with Janarion Grant for now.
Recency bias, I think, is creeping in for you here, JC, because Michael Pinball Clemens has his hand up here and wants into this conversation. He's not knocking down the door. He's freaking pinballing around like he did so many times to the end zone. I think this is a very subjective debate, okay? Admittedly, JC, you need to take off the cloak right now and reveal your bias. I think that signed picture of Gizmo Williams gives it away, but your proud dad there and you are lifelong green and gold fans, okay? So when you're talking about this, I think that needs to be removed. And I like how you didn't even say that it was the Giz and that you actually challenged this guy. So my man JC ain't afraid of anything. But I think we need to see all of these returns, as both of you guys pointed out so astutely, side by side by side. CFL, we gave you a free idea. TSN, heaven forbid, we gave you a free idea. This is something that should be in TSN's pregame show leading into Thursday night's game. And I would challenge them as well to have an interview with Gizmo Williams. This is the type of content that we know on 3DownNation the people want. I think TSN needs to do a better job of this. So they should have this queued up. If they don't, they got time now from when we release this thing to get it ready for Thursday night's game. And they should talk to the Giz, because I think he's one of the guys that can rule on this. Certainly Pinball Clemens should be a guy you should talk to, even though he doesn't really like giving his opinion. But Hodge, TSN and the CFL should be paying you extra money for these great content ideas.
They know where to get. They know how to reach me. I'll set up that direct deposit. Here we go. But historically, just for context, the Giz has the most punt returns in CFL history. It's not even close. He had 1,003, which is insane that he brought back 1,000 punts over the course of his career. The next most at 659 is Paul Bennett. Paul Bennett only had one touchdown return, but his average was 9.6 yards, which is right there with a lot of great returners. The number 2 guy, and Henry Gizmo Williams, of course, has the most punt return touchdowns at 26. Second is not Michael Pinball Clemens. Second is Keith Stokes at 9. Pinball is third with 8. And then Janarion Grant, despite only playing 35 games, is next at 7. So when it comes to the Giz, that is the context of how crazy his numbers are. Not only does he have the most, he has the most even compared to the next 3 guys behind him combined. So that's why I reached out to the Giz. And hey, why not have Giz give his top 5, even just from his crew? That'd be a great place to start. I had 1 for the article. I thought 5 would be too many. But anyways, good times. And you're right. That's a great idea for TSN's pregame. Chad Kelly threw for 238 yards in his 2023 regular season debut and ran the ball 5 times for 28 yards and 3 touchdowns. His favorite target on the day was DeMonte Coxey, who caught 6 passes for 131 yards. It's early, but given how slowly some CFL quarterbacks have started, we've already talked about Bo Levi Mitchell, Taylor Cornelius, among others. Do you view Kelly as a top 3 quarterback in the CFL right now?
Oh, that's a tough one, Hodge. I'm going to push back on that right now. I think the top 3 that we've seen so far this season, clearly it's Zach Collaros, it's Trevor Harris, it's Vernon Adams Jr. But can Chad Kelly be in that top 3 or even number 1 by the end of the season? I think that is well within the realm of possibility. I was very impressed with his first half performance in his debut as the Argonauts starter. We all know I've been pounding the table for Kelly for well over a year now. I think he has all the physical tools to be successful. He brings infectious energy to the field anytime he plays. And we saw the flashes. Some of that arm strength he showed off on that deep ball to DeMonte Coxey, that was impressive. The way he ran on that first short yardage touchdown and juked out Ja'Garrett Davis and then headed for the end zone, that was so impressive, right? This is a guy who can do it all. And I think probably Dunk will touch on it. We want him to take less shots going forward because he's no spring chicken anymore. He's 29 years old. He probably shouldn't be taking unnecessary hits at the end of a game, but that's part of who he is, right? That's the type of excitement and passion and fire you get from Chad Kelly. And this is but a taste, I truly believe, of what we're going to see this season from him. He's not going to quite reach the Nathan Rourke echelon that we saw last year in terms of that highest ceiling. He's going to have more turnovers than that. But this is a guy I truly believe in his first year as starter can be an elite player in the CFL.
It's clear to me from talking to Chad Kelly post-game in the locker room that he is locked in. This dude seems laser focused. And for what it's worth, he was walking around after doing his post-game interview or scrum, I should say, with a box of pizza, like handing out slices, eating pizza. So this guy is an everyman in the locker room, clearly has the room on his side. Ryan Dinwiddie is very much backing Chad Kelly as his quarterback and talking about how high they've been on him. But Ryan Dinwiddie echoed the sentiments of his famous and legendary uncle, Jim Kelly, when he said, man, you got to take less hits. You got to get down in that situation. I don't care how old you are as a quarterback. You don't ever want to take needless shots. I think Chad Kelly will learn from that. But there was some people online that were trying to downplay Kelly's performance, which I can understand their point of view. But the ball game was out of hand. The Argonauts did a great job of controlling the football on the ground. They were nursing a rather large lead, due in part to Bo Levi Mitchell's turnovers in that game. And when Mitchell went out, it was relatively over. So you can look at his numbers, 14-23, for over 200 yards and 3 rushing touchdowns, say, it's kind of decent. But that was really done in what, fellas, about a half or even 3/4 of football. So he finished drives. He showed you that he's got some moves that we haven't even seen before, because he made JG miss in a phone booth. And I asked him about that after, and he said, that move came all the way back from the days when I played fullback. And I started laughing. He's like, no, I'm serious. Go look it up. So he still has that skill set from all the way back when he was a kid playing running back and fullback to make somebody miss in the open field. Like, that is a rare move that I don't even think we've seen from Nathan Rourke or Vernon Adams Jr., guys who I think would have that type of move in their repertoire. Like, he did that in a small amount of space. To me, that was arguably the highlight of the night. I like the deep ball to Coxey as well, but that move to me showed something very unique for Chad Kelly. The one thing I was surprised about, guys, is that the TV rating for this game was not where I thought it would be. I definitely thought it would be over 300,000 and even potentially get to 400,000 or 500,000, but to come in less than 300,000 on a Sunday night was somewhat surprising to me, considering the Tiger Cats usually have a decent viewing audience and the Argonauts as well. So I wonder if Father's Day had anything to play with that. And they were, to be fair, going up against the final round of the U.S. Open, which went later Eastern time because it was in Los Angeles, and there was a stacked leaderboard there, and it had a rating of over 400,000 over a super long window. Like, the telecast for that started at 1, and then I think it ended around 10 o'clock Eastern time. So right up against that Argos Ticats game, and it was on TSN as well. So maybe that drew some eyeballs away, but I think as Chad Kelly goes along here and the hype builds, that audience will be bigger, and the crowd size at BMO will as well.
To me, the short list, and yeah, I like Kelly. To me, he's number 4 behind the 3 that JC listed. But the thing that stood out to me about this list is you've got Vernon Adams Jr. here, a guy who a couple years ago nobody wanted, reignited his career. Trevor Harris, a guy who a couple years ago nobody wanted, started off last season as a backup. And you got Chad Kelly, who, was a backup for all of last season. So when you look at the changing landscape of CFL quarterbacks, or maybe guys who have proven doubters wrong following a slump, there's precedent from them popping up. And I hope that some of the guys who are veterans, who are currently in slumps, or currently looking to get their game back, can do it. Because the quarterbacking was better in week 2 than it was in week 1. But to be quite frank, it still wasn't good enough. We need to see more from our quarterbacks in this league, putting up points, putting up big passes, and that's going to help boost those ratings that Dunk is talking about.
The BC Lions visit the Winnipeg Blue Bombers on Thursday night at IG Field in a battle of undefeated West Division teams. The Bombers covered a large spread last week against Saskatchewan and are around 6-point favorites against the Leos. Do you think Big Blue can cover again?
Well, last week I pointed up to the buffet with my fork and knife, and I ate all those points. And guess what? The Bombers not only covered a touchdown in Riderville, but they more than doubled that, right? This was a game the Riders played very well in, and they got their butts whooped, right? Like this Winnipeg team, at some point, I still think later on in the year, other teams and injuries will obviously play a large factor in this. But I think other teams will catch up to Winnipeg to at least some extent, give them a run for their money. But it's pretty clear that the road to the Grey Cup, at least in the West Division, very much runs through IG Field. With all due respect to the BC Lions, who I have as the second best team in the West right now, only a little bit over, I would honestly say probably the Saskatchewan Roughriders in spot number 3 at the moment. I don't think they're going to be able to come into IG and cover this spread. I certainly don't think they're going to win. Dominic Rhymes is out. He's their best receiver in my view. Keon Hatcher's still out. Yes, they get Lucky Whitehead back. That's nice, especially because Winnipeg, by the way, is starting a rookie at boundary cornerback with Demario Houston out. That's one thing to watch. Maybe Vernon Adams Jr. and Lucky Whitehead can get that going, but it's going to be hostile territory. The crowd at IG is going to be big. It's going to be loud, and I have the Bombers winning this game and covering that spread.
Well, I think it's indisputed that the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are the powerhouse team in the CFL right now, and I simply don't see a half-strength BC Lions offense beating them in this game. You need Keon Hatcher and Dominic Rhymes healthy to be able to pull that type of upset. But this BC defense, they're the real deal. Ryan Phillips is one of the best young coaches in the CFL right now. They have talent all across the board, some really quality Canadians there, guys who are super underrated. So I'm going to pick Winnipeg straight up, but BC is going to cover this massive spread. I don't want to pick Winnipeg to cover until it gets to about 3 points, if it does so later in the week.
Hodge, I hope you got your napkin on because this is a lot of points to eat, okay? And as part of the reason I'm not going to pick the Bombers to cover, I think they win this game straight up, but Brady Oliveira is a game-time decision with a thorax injury, so I think that could play a role here too. And you mentioned the rookie starting at corner, and you got Lucky Whitehead over there who, when he's healthy, is one of the fastest, if not the fastest dude in the league. I think that can be exploited, and I agree with you guys. I think Dominic Rhymes being out of the lineup is a real blow to the Lions. I think he's their best receiver, and he's also the receiver that Vernon Adams Jr. seems to trust the most in this group right now. And I think the defense is a reason why the Lions can keep this one close. And I think the Lions have been underrated a little bit here. And yeah, they probably should have scored some more points against Edmonton last week, but I think that Elks defense is actually really good. And I think Chris Jones has them going. So I see a tighter ball game, and it's really hard to continue to win by margins like the Bombers have done in the CFL when it's such a small league. And now the Lions have a couple games of tape to study. So give me the Lions to cover, especially if it gets up over that 7 number. But I like the Bombers to win yet again. Zach Collaros has never lost to the BC Lions.
You guys are welcome to eat, or I'll eat the points, and next week you guys can eat your words. The Montreal Alouettes are coming off a bye and head to Steeltown for a matchup with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Matthew Schiltz will get the start in place of an injured Bo Levi Mitchell, and the Tabbies are short favorites after originally being favored by a field goal in this game. JC, can the Tabbies get their first win of the season without their $500,000 man?
I think they can. This is an interesting line because the Ticats are 0-2 and have not looked good through 2 games. The Alouettes won their first game, but yet Hamilton is favored, and I think this is correct. Right now, Matthew Schultz might be a better option under center than Bo Levi Mitchell has been the last 2 weeks. I think that offense is going to look a little bit better this week. And even though Montreal got a close victory over a bad Ottawa team in week 1, I still don't have complete faith in that team. They've got some major holes, some young players who are going to have to prove it to me. I'm picking Hamilton to win this game.
Yeah, Montreal won like a mud fight in week 1 with Ottawa. That game was not glitzy or glamorous at all. And I like the value on the Tiger Cats here, and they have the better playmakers. Duke Williams, Tim White, James Butler. Give me them over whoever the Alouettes are going to run out there. I don't care if Austin Mack flashed in week 1. And yes, I know they have Willie Stanback back there, but I like the Tiger Cats in this spot. Short home favorites. There's going to be a lot of energy there at Tim Hortons Field, and the pressure is ratcheting it up real quick on Orlando Steinauer in his group. And I actually think they are some Bo Levi Mitchell turnovers away from at least having 1 win, if not 2. If those turnovers stop, Matthew Schultz takes care of the football and add in his ability to run with it a little bit when needed. I think there's great value here on Hamilton to win this game straight up and cover.
Yeah, I'm going to take Hamilton up to a field goal. To me, this team, I don't think is going to look worse, frankly, with Matthew Schultz under center, at least given the version of Bo Levi Mitchell we saw in the first 2 weeks of the season. I'm happy to take the Tabbies as short favorites. I think this line actually is a little bit deflated because the Alouettes are coming off a win. Though, as Doug said, a win is a win. It counts as 2 points in the standings, but it was not a terribly impressive win as far as victories go.
The Saskatchewan Roughriders go to Cowtown on Saturday, where the green and white duel against the Calgary Stampeders in a battle of 1-1 teams. Trevor Harris threw for over 400 yards in last week's loss, while Jake Mayer is still looking to get comfortable at the controls for the Stamps. Calgary is a 3.5-point favorite in this one. Do you think there's still value in taking the points?
Definitely there's value in taking the points, and the Roughies on the money line. When you hear this podcast or watch it on YouTube, you got to get your money down before this line changes, because I can't understand how the Roughriders are getting 3 in the hook on the road for as good as they have looked. And there's a possibility that Derek Moncrief could be back in some form or fashion on defense. Craig Dickinson said he probably wouldn't start, but he likes to play things coy. So I think Moncrief back in the lineup could be a real bonus for that defense. And Trevor Harris seems to have all kinds of confidence and quickly developed a rhythm with these receivers in his receiving core. Sean Bain Jr. has had this one circled ever since leaving Calgary to go to Saskatchewan and get paid properly. So he's coming off a great game against the Blue Bombers. His confidence is high. I like Saskatchewan to win. Straight up, spread, money line, put your money down, count all that green cash.
The one concern I have here for the Riders is last season when the Bombers went into Mosaic Stadium on Labor Day and the Bombers beat the Riders. Craig Dickinson talked about how that kind of deflated his team because the Riders played very well in that game, came away with a narrow loss. I believe Mark Leggio kicked a 55-yard field goal for the W. And they came out of the Banjo Bowl next week, albeit with stomach flu ravaging the team, but just played terribly, got their butts whipped. So to me, my only concern in this one, as great as the Riders played last week, they played very well despite losing by, I think it was 17 points. Are they going to come out deflated again? Because they played a great game against their Prairie rivals and still lost by a sizable margin. That said, it is still early in the season, so maybe that type of performance buoys the Riders a little bit. I'm not willing to go crazy on this spread. I would say up to +3. I'm happy to take the Riders, take the points, and beyond +3. Under +3, I'd be tempted to take the Stamps because I do think the Stampeders are going to win this game straight up at home, but I think it's going to be very close. So if you can get +3 or higher, again, I like the Riders. Under that, I'm a little skeptical.
With all due respect, Hodge, the performance of the team last year in a game where they were plagued by diarrhea and vomit plays no part in my decision-making here on this spread.
That was the Banjo Bowl. Didn't you say Labor Day?
The one afterwards when
lost
they had the
Labor
stomach
Day.
flu.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
anyway, That plays no part in my decision here. I love the Riders in this matchup, and it comes down to quarterbacks. Trevor Harris looked far better in his game last week. 400 yards passing. I thought it was a legitimate performance from him. It wasn't inflated at all. He looked crisp despite the injury. And Jake Mayer, he threw for 300 yards. People are going to be higher on him this week than they were in the past. But 2/3 of that, almost 200 yards, came after the catch. He's still dinking and dunking his way down the field, relying on his receivers on screens. That's not a way to win consistently in the CFL. So give me the Riders because I trust Trevor Harris.
The Edmonton Elks are trying to snap an 18-game losing streak. Where have you heard that before? On Sunday, when the Green and Gold host the defending Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts, Chad Kelly and company looked great in the Double Blues season opener last week, beating the Ticats by 18 points at BMO Field. The Elks sticking with Taylor Cornelius at QB for now, despite being shut out last week in Vancouver, and are 7-point underdogs at Commonwealth Stadium. Who do you have in this one and why?
7-point home dog to me is barking. It's screaming. It wants me to take it. But how do you pick a team to cover a 7-point spread when they just scored a grand total of 0 points? That is my struggle, especially when it appears they're going to trot out literally the exact same offensive group that they did a week ago. For that reason and for that reason alone, I need to take the Toronto Argonauts. Right now, I've got them at -6.5. I don't think I'd go beyond 7 points, but if it's a touchdown, yes. And I think one of the things that goes overlooked, Dunk mentioned it earlier, is Corey Mace's defense has been sensational. They do a great job of rotating along that front. They've got a lot of underrated players there. Robbie Smith is one of them. Thomas Costigan is another guy who can do a lot of damage coming off the edge in a rotational role. I think that this game is not going to be a blowout. I think Edmonton is going to look better, but I'm skeptical that they will be able to keep it in 7. I will take the Argos, as much as I detest picking against such a big home underdog.
News for all you people out there who bought a guaranteed win ticket earlier this year. You're probably coming back for another week at Commonwealth Stadium because I don't think Edmonton pulls this out. Now, this is going to be a real test for Chad Kelly because I do think that Chris Jones' defense is legit. He's one of the best defensive minds in the CFL, and he's really going to test a younger quarterback in Chad Kelly who doesn't have a whole lot of experience. It'll be telling how he performs. But with Taylor Cornelius under center, I cannot trust the Elks at all in this game to perform offensively until they make a change at quarterback. I'm picking Toronto to win and to cover no matter how big that spread gets.
There is no way I would encourage or tell anyone out there to put down their hard-earned money on the Edmonton Elks until they show any signs of life on offense, and that's earth to Taylor Cornelius. So I'm going to do what even I don't love, and I would agree with Hodge, lay the points on the road. I'm like Hodge. I got my fork and knife out with my napkin on, ready to eat my tofu and kale salad and gobble up all of these points because I just cannot lay any money on the Elks. I don't even care what the spread is right now. If it goes over 7, that's fine because they just have shown they cannot move the football consistently. And this Argonauts defense, a good chunk of it have played together for a while and have some chemistry, and they're getting Jamal Peters back at corner. Like they had a 21-year-old starting last week in Quintez Stiggers who intercepted Bo Levi Mitchell, and they decided to go with him because they wanted to get Peters back up to speed after he came back after being released from the Atlanta Falcons. But they really like Stiggers' upside, but they're getting Peters back, so it's going to get even more difficult for Cornelius to try to score points here. So I'm doing it. I'll take the defending champs on the road, even though I think the number's a little bit inflated, and it's going to be difficult for Chad Kelly to score points against Chris Jones, but sign me up for the double blue.
The nice thing about splitting a buffet with Dunk is he'll eat all the stuff I don't want. He keep the kale. You keep the tofu. I got the rest covered, baby.
You need your greens, bro.
Yeah, there's lots of green foods I like. Kale, I'm not a kale guy. It's now time for Hodge's Heritage Moment. On this day in 2000, Willie Pless played his final game of his CFL career. The Alabama native played 14 CFL seasons with Toronto, BC, Edmonton, and Saskatchewan, dressing for one preseason game with Edmonton to retire as a member of the team. The 11-time CFL All-Star recorded a league record 1,241 tackles, along with 84 sacks and 39 interceptions. He was named the CFL's most outstanding defensive player a record 5 times and remains the only player to receive the honor more than 3 times. He appeared in 3 Grey Cups, winning 1, and was inducted into the Canadian Football Hall of Fame in 2005. Now, it should be noted that the CFL did not track tackles as an official statistic until 1987, which was the second year of Pless's career. For further context on his total numbers, Adam Bighill, the league's active leading tackler with 826, remains over 400 behind Pless's all-time record. Dunk, you're old enough to remember Willie Pless playing. What do you recall about the legendary linebacker?
Dude, this guy, it didn't matter what jersey he had on, because sometimes you had to get it figured out back in the day because he was switching teams a little bit. But when the CFL was broadcast on CBC, from what I remember watching it, it was like Willie Pless on the tackle, Willie Pless on the tackle, Willie Pless on the tackle. Like, I feel like Mark Lee and Chris Walby and Chris Cuthbert and whoever else was calling those games back in the day said his name like every other play. The dude was just always there. He was so great at diagnosing plays and was a guy who was very athletic at the linebacker position, but still had that size. So I'll just always remember his name being said. It felt like almost every other down. That obviously wasn't the case, but the guy made a lot of tackles. And I wanted to get in a subtle jab here, something about the CFL and not keeping stats. I don't even know how you found these stats, Hodge, on Adam Bighill, Willie Pless, or anybody else.
Well, the CFL has all the records up till 2022 publicly available, and they do have the 2023 stats available to week 2. So I was able to put them together. It was just a lot more convoluted than it probably should have been. But anyways, it's time for the 3-minute drill.
TD Atlantic has sold out for the second consecutive year, though it took significantly longer to reach capacity than it did a year ago. Are you excited for the game, Hodge?
I am excited. I wasn't at last year's game. I'm going to be at this year's game. The one downside, this year's event is really only 48 hours. Last year was like a 4-day thing. So clearly on the ground, this is a pared down event, though the ticket prices were doubled. BC Lions offensive lineman Philip Norman collapsed at practice last week and was rushed to hospital, where he spent several days in recovery. He was at Lions practice on Tuesday and appears to be making a full recovery. JC, what can you tell us about his status?
Well, he underwent a whole whack load of tests and nothing came back. It's all inconclusive at this stage. They're still trying to figure out what exactly happened. But Norman wants to come back and play again, and he's back with the team. They're happy to have him around. It was a traumatic incident for the Lions last week. They battled through it to still get the victory, but they're happy that their teammate is back and in good condition. It could have been a whole lot worse. The CFL's TV ratings in week 2 were up from week 1. Is that an encouraging sign for the league?
It definitely is. I think part of it was the fact that the NBA Finals and the Stanley Cup Final are over. Those are big TV events that the CFL has to go up against early in the season. But the ratings from week 2 are up on the site on 3DownNation.com. You can go check them out. Told me that when you put your best out there, you get some big ratings. Like the Saskatchewan Winnipeg game had a rating of almost 700,000 viewers. So that would be a great idea to start your season off. Fortunately, though, for the league, that game was on CBS Sports. So people would have seen a high-scoring shootout that had over 700 yards of passing and I think, what was it, 5 or 6 or 7 touchdowns combined throwing between the two guys?
Yeah.
The Edmonton Elks have honored the closure of local sports radio station TSN 1260 with a special ticket promotion. What do you think of the initiative?
I think it's great all the way around. It gives closure for the folks who worked at that station. It gives closure for the people who listen to that station on a daily basis. And obviously, albeit at a discounted rate, it still gets a ton of people in the door at Commonwealth Stadium. And the Elks had the opportunity, I think, to do a lot of things like this because their building is so bloody big, right? This wouldn't work in some buildings where there's no room to give away discounted tickets or to do things like this. At Commonwealth, where you're never going to sell out all 60,000 seats anyways, Why not do something like this? I think it's great. Dominic Rhymes is out for Thursday's game in Winnipeg, though BC will get Lucky Whitehead back from a hamstring injury. Is that a big deal?
It's a huge deal, and it's nice to have Lucky Whitehead back in the fold to take the top off of defense, but the loss of Rhymes is impactful. This is the guy who really makes the BC Lions offense run. We saw it this past week. Him and VA were not on the same page early in that game. They struggled offensively. It wasn't until Vernon Adams Jr. found him on a 21-yard route down the seam that offense really started to click. He is the engine. It's going to be interesting to see what they look like without him on the field. Four-time All-Star offensive tackle Derek Dennis announced his retirement from the CFL. How will you remember the gregarious blocker?
A dude who was a great personality in this league that, quite frankly, we need more of. And I hope we see more guys like Derek Dennis come along in the CFL to help build the hype around these players who deserve it so much. The Hamilton Tiger Cats signed Canadian kicker Mark Leggio after placing Seth Small on the suspended list. Was that a savvy move?
I do think it was a savvy move. Mark Leggio, yes, he had some challenges under pressure situations in Winnipeg, but there are very few Canadians who can do all three jobs at a competent level, and he can do that. That type of versatility with that passport is important. The Montreal Alouettes released Canadian linebacker Brian Haralamana this week, who is set to join the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Was his release a surprise?
Was I surprised that Noel Thorpe couldn't find a way to use a talented Canadian linebacker? No, that did not surprise me. It does, in fact, surprise me that they let such a player walk, though, because I think Brian Haralamana looked good last year. He had a couple starts under his belt. He can play on special teams. That's a valuable piece that you have to give up, and a local piece at that for the Montreal Alouettes, but he was not going to see the field in that defensive structure. The Hamilton Tiger Cats signed Canadian offensive lineman Noah Zur after the unit suffered yet another injury, this time to Coulter Woodmansey at guard. Can he help the Ticats O-line?
He definitely can. I really thought Zur would be better in terms of when he was drafted and coming out of the University of Saskatchewan. So it's nice to see he's getting another chance, but he's got to understand that these aren't going to continue coming. He's got to make the most of this opportunity. The Edmonton Elks moved veteran defensive back Ed Gainey to the 6-game injured list. Do you think his season could be over?
Well, Chris Jones was not willing to rule it out this week when he spoke to the media, but he did also talk about the recovery for that injury in terms of months, not weeks. And so at his age, 33, one would have to think there's a chance we've seen the last of Ed Gainey, at least for this season. On that note, we thank you as always for listening to the 3DownNation podcast. Enjoy week 3 of CFL action, and we'll see you again next Wednesday for our next episode.